इंडिया स्पीक्स डेली को सब्सक्राइब करें, उसके बेल आइकन को ज़रूर दबाएं यदि आपको इसकी पत्रकारिता पसंद हो। धन्यवाद।
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to India Speaks Daily. Even as Jammu and Kashmir is an union territory now, with things getting back to normal, the internet services being resumed, the United States has now started interfering in the matter of Jammu and Kashmir. The United States is now interfering in an internal matter of India. And in its latest offensive, the US has called for India to release political leaders who have been detained without charges in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. So the United States, the US has started playing politics yet again, gathering with Pakistan, coupling with Pakistan. It has started playing politics on the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. And it all started with the US President Donald Trump again offering his mediation to supposedly resolve the conflict of Jammu and Kashmir between India and Pakistan. Donald Trump made this offer of mediation while he was addressing world media, while he was addressing journalists along with Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos. And this address was just a bit before Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan and the American President Mr. Trump were scheduled to meet privately, formally, to discuss various issues during the World Economic Forum in Davos. So now there is a sort of a discrepancy with regard to facts that whether President Donald Trump actually made this offer or not, because the readout of the meeting in Davos doesn't mention Kashmir at all, doesn't mention the speech about Kashmir at all. It doesn't mention that Kashmir was discussed at all. However, according to a White House transcript before the meeting, Trump said, "We are talking about Kashmir and the relation to what is going on with Pakistan and India. And if we can help, we certainly will be helping." So even though there are discrepancies in the official version of the minutes of the meeting at the Davos and the White House transcript, it goes beyond doubt that the American President Mr. Donald Trump indeed did offer some sort of a mediation when he was addressing the media during that meeting that day in Davos. And this isn't the first time that the American president has done it. Just a couple of days after Section 370 was removed from Jammu and Kashmir, American president had also made this offer of mediation between India and Pakistan in order to supposedly solve the dispute of Jammu and Kashmir, and India had flatly refused at that point of time, categorically saying that Jammu and Kashmir is India's internal matter, and if there are any differences, any conflicts, they will be solved by India and Pakistan themselves in a bilateral manner, and third-party intervention is not required. In fact, according to many media reports, this is reportedly Donald Trump's fourth offer to help resolve the Kashmir issue. So this is his fourth offer, and India has categorically rejected his offer of help again. India has categorically reiterated its stand that Jammu and Kashmir is India's internal matter. And this is a good thing that with regard to the issue of Jammu and Kashmir, despite the US taking a very vague stand, very unclear stand vis-a-vis Jammu and Kashmir, President Donald Trump has left no stone unturned in throwing hints at India that he would like to interfere in the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. But India has adopted a very balanced stance, and it has been polite yet firm with the US in getting the point across and driving the point across that the US will not be allowed to interfere in the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, the whole point here is that within this entire context, one is forced to re-examine in the light of President Trump's what he said in Davos regarding Jammu and Kashmir. One is forced to re-examine, one is forced to re-evaluate the entire trajectory of India and US relationship. And one is forced to reevaluate this relationship in the light of American President Donald Trump's rather wishy-washy and rather dilly-dallying, rather cunning foreign policy, for the lack of a better word. Because if there's one word to describe President Donald Trump, it's unstable and unreliable. And by that extension, the American foreign policy under his leadership has largely been unstable and unreliable. One moment he's making to you the best of promises, he's your friend, and the other moment he doesn't recognize you, he becomes your enemy. So Donald Trump's personality is very complicated, and he's been a very unpredictable leader, and which makes America's foreign policy very unpredictable. Because despite the external bonhomie that Donald Trump projects towards our Prime Minister Narendra Modi, despite that external facade of friendship and goodwill and all this sweet gestures, let's not forget that Donald Trump is solely guided by the economic interests of the US. He's solely guided by the economic, strategic, security interests of the US. And in order to safeguard those interests, he won't think twice. He won't think twice to jeopardize the interests of India or any other country. So India needs to be very, very careful about America's developing equation with Pakistan. And Pakistan is important to America for various reasons. Of course, the business reasons, the economic reasons aside, it is mainly from the point of view of Afghanistan that Pakistan is very important for the US. The US needs Pakistan's sustained intervention to get out of the mess that it has created in Afghanistan. The US needs Pakistan to continuously mediate in the talks with Taliban, to act as a mediator so that the supposed peace talks of the US with Taliban can be concluded. Now, whether one can actually have any peace talks with an organization like Taliban is a different matter altogether, but the crux of the matter is that the US has got itself into an irredeemable mess as far as Afghanistan is concerned, and now it's looking towards Pakistan with hope to help it get out of that mess. The year-long US-Taliban dialogue is seeking an American troop withdrawal from the country in return for the insurgent group's counter-terrorism assurances of commitment to enter into intra-Afghanistan negotiation to permanently end hostilities between the two countries. So the point here is that, of course, although India doesn't really have to worry about the US taking any proactive decision, the US taking any proactive measure with regard to questioning the Union Territory status, questioning the removal of 370 article from Jammu and Kashmir. But at the same time, India has to be very, very careful of the US, because since it needs Pakistan now more than ever, especially to solve the Afghanistan crisis, it will keep on dangling the Kashmir carrot in front of Pakistan in order to keep Pakistan hooked on and in order to keep Pakistan appeased. So although this is not an imminent serious threat for India, since the entire international community, including most of the European countries, as well as a large majority of the Muslim world is with India with regard to the Jammu and Kashmir issue. So US would most probably not embarrass itself. It won't really make a fool out of itself, won't want to make a fool out of itself by raising the issue of Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir on an international platform and by siding with Pakistan. But still, India has to be very, very careful, since clearly Donald Trump has had no consistent stand on Kashmir, and time and again, whenever he meets the Pakistani Pakistani Prime Minister Mr. Imran Khan. He dangles this carrot of Jammu and Kashmir, that he's closely watching the developments and that he would like to mediate and blah blah blah. Now, another important thing is that in the context of India-US relations, if you examine its developments over the past 2-3 years, what is also evident is that while India has been consistently conceding to the US interests, while India has sort of taken care of US interests, it has rather gone out of its way also to take into consideration the interests of the US. The US has done very little or absolutely nothing to address India's interests. Now take the Iranian oil sanctions for example. Despite India's repeated requests, despite India's repeated lobbying, US was very tough in its stance. It didn't exclude India. It didn't give India exemptions from the Iranian oil sanctions. And the result is for all of us to see, for a developing country like India. Now India has to bend over backwards to procure oil from sources other than Iran, because let's not forget, Iran used to offer very favorable terms and conditions to India to import oil, which none of the other countries offer. And this is of course also a very clever strategy by the US to make other countries, including India, to import oil from the US itself at much, and for India it comes in at much expensive rates as compared to what it used to import from Iran. So the US didn't listen to India's request on Iranian oil exemptions, and then last year it excluded India from the generalized system of trade preferences, a preferential trade agreement that gives certain preferences, certain leeway to countries that are a part of this agreement. So India was ruthlessly excluded from the GSP. And besides this, at the WTO, American President Donald Trump has repeatedly questioned the developing country status of India, and he has repeatedly accused India of taking undue advantage of the of various subsidies that are offered by WTO to India in order to protect its farmers, in order to protect its domestic industries. So the US has been extensively been after India. It has been rather against India at the WTO. In fact, in the recent WTO forum in Davos, the American president made a statement saying that India and China are taking advantage of this status as developing countries, and they're taking undue advantage of this status in order to further their business interests. And he further suggested that he would hold discussions with the International Trade Body Chief for the WTO reform. And India obviously criticized Donald Trump's comments. India criticized the comments of the American president. So this it is within this broad context of America's rather inflexible position with regard to many things between India and the US, especially with regard to India's trade interests, India's economic interests, despite so many consultations, despite India going out of its way to engage with the US has hardly conceded any ground to India. And with regard to Jammu and Kashmir also, as we have seen repeatedly, the position of the American President Donald Trump is very shaky. It is far from clear. He changes his stance on Jammu and Kashmir every second day. So the US foreign policy under President Trump is a foreign policy of pure opportunism, which, as I said previously, won't think twice before hampering the interests of India, won't think twice before sort of breaking the, doing something that can damage the Indian economy to a considerable extent in order to safeguard its own interests. So India, although it does need the US for all sorts of things, for safeguarding its interests from a geopolitical perspective, because let's accept it, the global hegemony of power right now is tilted towards the US. So India cannot escape the fact that it has to somehow negotiate with the US. It does have to somehow keep the US pacified, but at the same time, India also has to be very cautious of the US, and India has to play it out tough with the US and not completely give in to the US. It always has to view the foreign policy of US with a critical eye, because as we said, under the leadership of President Donald Trump, the foreign policy of US is very, very shaky. He's not conceding to India's economic interests. And with regard to Jammu and Kashmir also, the position of US has been rather unclear and vague. Thank you.